Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today at NUGGET 2021. Our next session will be a panel covering tips and tricks for using the Netreo platform. Today's session is led by members of the outstanding Netreo Support and Professional Services team. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the team. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask and they'll get those answered for you. So all systems are go. Netreo team, let's get started.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our Netreo tips and tricks session. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Brian Olson, and I am the Director of Operations Engineering, which encompasses the support, CS services, and implementation services engineering teams. Joining me today will be a couple of our implementation engineers. That'll be Frequan Kaja and Zach Weingardner. Two of our CS services engineers, Jacob McJunkins and Jason Skufka, as well as two of our support engineers, which is Renee Sanchez and Steve Welch. For today's best practice session, we want to have a roundtable discussion with the team and get some insight from them on the challenges customers face with the life cycle of a network management platform, user adoption, and some of the recommendations they have for resolving those challenges. That said, one of the challenges that companies have with the systems used for managing their IT environment is either getting users to fully utilize a newly deployed solution, or in some cases, the challenges that some customers face in regards to the adoption rate or just general use of the solution dropping off, the longer the solution has actually been deployed in their environment. Sometimes this can simply be because the solution is too complex for them to utilize it. It could be training, lack of training, and sometimes it's just simply poor configuration, which leads to things like too much noise, and thereby they no longer trust the tool set, so they stop using it. I want to start off with those challenges in mind today, the life cycle of an IT management platform. Zach, what are some of the recommendations you have to help make sure that the system deployed doesn't end up being either shelfware or is underutilized?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I honestly, I think it really starts with the initial implementation. A lot of times we tend to run across customers that are so gung-ho and just getting everything in there, monitoring it, and alerts spit out, that they don't really plan a whole lot up front. And what this kind of causes is that the life cycle of the solution kind of dies off. You know, people tend to get upset with the alerts and things like that. So it's really important to kind of consider from the beginning the strategy that you're going to lay out. Some key components of that you can keep in mind is things like how you're going to plan your grouping methods. And one of the importance behind this is really how we can utilize those different groupings to then pass alerting based off of templates that are applied to them. This is done in a bit of a hierarchical kind of sense. So another consideration to keep in mind here is basically how you configure your templates, right? This helps with ease of long-term management and controls, as well as really understanding where things are going to be generating alerts and why that's happening. Some other things to kind of consider is also how you're going to automate your onboarding of new devices. Things to consider, controls we can have in place so that the onboarding is going to respect the overall strategy that you had created with your grouping and with your templates. Now, one utility that we can utilize in an effort to ensure that while you're onboarding devices, those controls are in place is our auto configuration parameters. So what this allows you to do is as a device is discovered into the system, you can build certain parameters so that it follows a structure that you had strategized. So this is going to ensure that those devices are going to fall into those containers, which you're going to have those templates applied to and ultimately generate those alerts.
Thanks, Zach. This also drives home the need to have a templating structure that is properly aligned. Spending time planning out how these management controls are going to get applied to devices is really important. For example, we have customers that will assign templates to a category. However, if these controls are not in place, there's a good chance that devices may not end up in their proper category, hence will not have the correct template settings applied to them.
One other thing you can keep in mind to make sure that we continually have this structure followed is taking use of our AI autopilot feature. So what this does is this gives you an ability to set certain controls based off of our trained modules and models, so that we can watch things like, say, your auto configurations, and we can notify team members when any of these devices may not live in this configuration that we had strategized. And if we would like, at times, take an action to make sure that those devices do live inside of those, grouping considerations, ensuring that the strategy that we had come up with is going to be followed. There are some other added benefits to using your AI autopilots as well. Not only can you do things like drive the consistency and structure and follow that strategy that you laid out through implementation, but you can also do things like ensure that the device types that we have configured on the devices are correct. A scenario that I've seen customers run into at times is that, perhaps they've got a Cisco router that's going to be replaced by another manufacturer, say a Juniper router, right? And perhaps they didn't have a process in place to consider this and make the changes inside of the NMS software like they should have, which could lead to missed polling cycles. Now, if you had AI ops autopilot enabled for that model, what it can do is look through and compare those devices based off of sys description to the device sets we have in place, and ensure that they are consuming the correct device type and getting those polls that we need for that time series data. Again, this can be something that is just in a way of an alert, a report that you can generate and see, or after you kind of get an idea of the changes that it'll make, you can even set it up so that it automatically makes these changes. And all in all, this really helps improve that life cycle of the software here, and ensuring that that strategy that had been developed in the very beginning of the process is continually being followed, and you're getting the most return out of the product.
Well said, Zach. One of the challenges that I've seen customers have in their environment is that as the IT organizations grow in the customer environment, they don't tend to preach that in the monitoring solution. So as the customers onboard new vendors and new devices in the environment, they should practice, and highly recommend that to the customers, is to have a strategy in place on onboarding those devices and setting up monitoring solution in place, and design the monitoring process as well when they onboard the new devices. And I recommend customers to speak to the individual users and align their monitoring needs and build their own custom dashboards to fit their monitoring requirements. As the organizations grow, their monitoring needs do grow. So having information being descriptive to what their monitoring needs are should be the primary goal towards the monitoring solution, and implementing it in such way. Not everything that is onboarded into the tool is utilized by each of those individual team members. So having customized dashboards to fit the monitoring need of a respective team is highly inclined to be practiced.
Yeah, it's all good stuff. One thing I'd like to interject with is that I'd like to stress the importance of making sure your systems and network are set up to be managed in the first place. Making sure that you have standardized credentials on your systems, making sure you have a standardized naming convention, interface descriptions. It goes a long way when you go to administrate and set up your Netreo appliance, especially when using your Netreo's configuration automation. It'll help standardize the management here. And as Zach pointed out, it really helps onboard devices and make it a really hands-off approach.
Renee, from a support perspective, what kind of recommendations do you have, or what are some of the things you come across that customers have challenges with?
Probably the biggest thing, Brian, is customers not spending enough time on defining the services and performance metrics they need that are critical and actionable. This can be as simple as, specifying, making sure that you have the right interfaces that you want to monitor for up and down status, or the specific interfaces that you want to monitor for just bandwidth utilization and apply some thresholds on there, or if you have interfaces that you just want to monitor a trend over time. This type of planning will prevent from getting alerted on all interfaces that are monitoring all metrics, because that will cause several alerts to be created, making it hard to manage your alerts in general.
Yeah, this leads us to the common issue that all companies experience, and really applies to just about every management system. And we're no exception to that. And that is the issue with over alerting. Nothing will make a management system obsolete or dissuade users from fully utilizing a system more than if they are getting inundated with false or what they perceive to be as non-relatable or reliable alerts.
That's right. Yeah. One of the key ways that I recommend customers using is to utilize Netreo's reporting capabilities. Netreo has vast reporting capabilities when it comes to utilizing time and report, history logs, etc. So that way customers can analyze their devices and see the trends in the alerts being generated by the Netreo system on a group of devices or a device itself. Understanding which of those services or ports, etc., are flapping quite often or are generating alerts that are not required, not are critical to their environment. So they could use these reports to better manage their templates and set up exception rules to not manage an alert on certain alarms that are not critical to their environment.
Yeah, and user reporting in general can be a great way to help minimize the volumes of alerts. Another great report for that is the incident report, which that can help you find just long-lasting incidents or incidents that are just the most common in your environment. And what you end up doing is if you just run that report and then you get a search field that lets you sort down to basically a specific type of incident that you're looking for, or maybe a specific device to see what kind of incidents are trending on it. And that'll help you, determine things that are flapping up and down, or things that have just been outstanding in your environment for an extended period of time. The next, really good report that's used for this is the new outage report, or newish kind of outage report. And so that basically you'll give you a full report of all the current outages on a specific check that you have in your environment, and you can use this to find basically problem areas in your environment where you need to go and address large groups of services that are out, and clear out some of those large alerts, or even make the decision on whether or not these need to be alerted on.
And to kind of tie into that, utilizing different tools, different reporting tools in the software, one that I would recommend and found use from is the template baseline tool. So what this can do is this can really give you visibility into which templates have those alerting parameters configured. And what it'll do is give you kind of a view based off of a certain timeline and the overall impact versus the volume of alert noise that's coming through. So it displays it in kind of an overall health. And what this really does is gives you the ability to determine which service checks and which thresholds are causing the most noise in the environment, and being able to understand that noise, and if there is perhaps a different configuration of the parameters that need to be put in place, or if this is an internal thing that needs to be addressed because teams maybe aren't fixing the issues that we're still alerting on.
Alert timeframes. That's another aspect of alerting that gets overlooked. Sometimes there's a part of your environment that you don't want to alert on 24/7. Same is true for certain action methods. Timeframes set up periods when Netreo can perform those actions, which can help reduce alert fatigue. Same with maintenance windows. Definitely best practice, but it's not always done. Coordinating planned outages by putting devices into maintenance mode reduces the number of alerts and confusion. And you can put specific thresholds or services into maintenance mode as well. It's not restricted to a whole device.
Yep, definitely true. One more thing I'd like to touch on here is parent and child relationships and incident management rules. Parent and child relationships, if you configure that, we have easy ways to do that through auto parenting and making some fine-tuned adjustments. But once you do this, we'll associate alarms to their parents rather. For example, if your edge device should go down, all the unreachable child devices underneath it will have their alarms associated as related alarms to that primary incident, and thus reducing your overall noise alert deluge.
Another, oh, I'm sorry.
No
Okay.
worries.
Go ahead.
Another area I like to go to is incident management rules. You can manually configure these incident management rules. A great example of this is you have a site that's known to have high latency. You can create a incident management rule to correlate other devices within the same site have the same threshold for high latency. So therefore you have the one incident with the related alarms in there instead of being alerted on all those devices within that site.
Another major point in reducing alert fatigue is not alerting on something just because you can. We recommend you alert on metrics because they are actionable and they are critical. For example, if you get an alert at 3 a.m. in the morning and you get out of bed and you take care of the issue from the alert, then we can argue that that alert is necessary. However, you get that alert at 3 a.m. and you decide to take care of it a few days later, we can argue that that alert may not be as necessary as we think it is.
That's a great point. And it certainly loops back to what we talked about earlier, as far as doing all the legwork up front during the planning phase before you're implementing the system. The importance of making a distinction between what value constitute a critical change or an anomaly and requires an action to be invoked, and then what types of values constitute a warning that maybe don't require somebody to get up in the middle of the night to do, but they certainly want to be something you can use reporting to look for things like trending or capacity planning. Switching a little bit gears here, I want to talk about one other item. One additional way to help a user adoption is through utilizing some of the automation of tasks and integration with third-party systems. And there's a correlation between those two systems. Jacob, can you kind of give us some of the strategies that you have recommended to some of your TAS clients?
Well, one of the ones that I see used pretty heavily in environments is automating responses to your incidents, and specifically using like restarting a service when you receive an alert that it's down. So restarting a Windows service is something that we have an automated response for. You just create the action for it. And the good news with this one is that it can be generalized to cover basically any service if you'd like it to. It can be that, as widespread as that, or you can set it to indicate for a specific group of services or just your critical ones. And so allowing, setting that up as your initial response to it could potentially fix problems before you even have to take time to address it. And then once setting those up, you have, the additional option to have your escalation contact, which will, basically if your automated action for restarting the service doesn't end up resolving your issue, that way you still get your alert so that you can go take care of the problem manually. But that can help reduce the overall, time frame that your incidents are open. Basically, your mean time to response is what you'd be reducing there.
Yeah, there's a few other active responses we can fire off to preempt an alert too. We can run scripts or terminal commands on SSH capable devices. We can do automated server reboots too. Although in terms of best practice, you should avoid setting that up without the right controls in place. A better approach would be setting that as a manual action, one you can run directly off your incident dashboard for rapid troubleshooting.
That's right, Jason. One of the other things that I recommend customers practice and develop a process around it is that to use Netreo's incident acknowledgement capability. We know when an alarm is generated, an incident is generated, and there are certain users working on that particular issue. And having that incident in an alarming state and in an active open state would make that incident generate multiple notifications to the users. So it's a good practice to always acknowledge incidents when they are being worked on, and let the other people know that the issue is being worked on, so that all the teams are on the same page. Incident acknowledgement can be practiced in an automated manner as well by setting up email acknowledgement, automatic email acknowledgement in Netreo with an email acknowledgement user, as well as by API method. Renee, can you talk a bit more about how they can utilize incident acknowledgement in an automated fashion?
Yeah, absolutely, Frequan. As you stated, the easiest way to keep all Netreo users on the same page so that everybody knows what incidents are currently open and being worked on is, what we recommend, using automatic incident acknowledgement in Netreo, using email or ITSM. For email, when an alert is received, users can acknowledge the incident by replying to an email, suppressing any further notification, letting the team know that the issue is being worked on. For ITSM, a script can be integrated to the ITSM tool so that when a ticket is assigned to a user, an API call is automatically made to acknowledge the incident in Netreo. Once again, letting the team know that it is already being worked on.
Let's talk for a second about some of the misconceptions around alert navigation and ITSM integration. For Quan, what are some of the gotchas you have come across out there in the field?
So one of the common misconceptions is that people tend to analyze a monitoring tool such as Netreo as the main platform for alert navigation. When customers have complex alerting needs where the alerts are based off of role of device, region where the device is placed at, and application owners, and complex rules such as timeframes of those alerts, people tend to utilize Netreo's incident management capabilities to direct the alerts. But we recommend people utilize an ITSM tool such as ServiceNow OpsGenie to utilize its alert navigation capabilities at its fullest, because they are much more capable of having complex rules being configured and workflows configured in them, so that way the alerts get directed to the right people and at the right priority as needed. So that way they have lesser alerts, and as well as grouping of alerts can be characterized using those tools in such manner.
One of the tools that I've worked with my customers to use for that is setting up device attributes in order to allow the incident management rules or the actions that we send out to your ITSM solution have additional fields set to allow for, or basically, more advanced definitions of how that stuff goes out. So whether it's the team that's intended to respond towards it, or the more specific, location of a device inside of a site, or just special case scenarios for a device, you're able to assign those device attributes directly to the devices and then pass those details through to your ITSM solution.
Yeah, device attributes are a great way to help further fine-tune your ITSM alerts going out. There are some best practices around standardizing the use of those device attributes. We recommend that users will use standardized key naming conventions, something that's clear and consistent. Define a process to update and add those key value pairs after new device addition or repurposing the device for a different role. Some several ways to do this. You could do it manually. You can do it in bulk as well from our device attributes admin page. You can also utilize this automatically with dynamic device attribute pollers, which you set up in your device poller page, and then you can use auto configuration parameters to, even from here, from this example here, set the other attributes on the device. And you can do it programmatically as well. You can use our API to script out a process to add or edit device attributes that fits with your workflow. One use case, such as one can use a report such as the device export to export your devices, and then you can audit your device in the attribute pairs configurations. You make sure that the device attributes only contain standardized important key value pairs as well. So even the value itself, standardized ASCII characters, nothing that's going to be special characters or anything that's not necessary within the ITSM.
Well, it looks like we are just about out of time for this session. I want to thank everybody for attending. Hopefully you found some value out of this and you enjoy the rest of your NUGGET 2021. Thank you again. Cheers.